members of the commission. So the applicant has come before you tonight for a public work session to address conditions of approval on DRH 21-369. This was initially heard back in November before the committee. They've come before you tonight with those materials addressing the conditions for the new project at 115 West Idaho Street. You'll likely recall that this is a 27-story mixed-use building with apartments, ground floor retail, structured parking. It's located at the corner of Idaho Street and 12th Street. So in the approval in November, the applicant was asked to come back to a work session addressing some specific items from the initial submittal. Those items include the parking structure, materials, screening and lighting, pedestrian level materials on the building, some balcony and exterior material clarifications, and then some planting plan clarifications, specifically on the roof of the podium and on the roof of the structure on the amenity deck. So the applicant submitted a package which has been distributed. The first thing to kind of highlight and talk about is in the memo is the change to the site plan to add an ingress driveway from Idaho Street. I believe the applicant will certainly explain it in further detail, but they do have some concerns about access and visibility to the parking structure. We evaluated the proposal with input from our comprehensive planning division, our transportation planners, and there are some policies that do discourage that access from Idaho Street. Number one, in the downtown design guidelines, it does recommend that parking entry should be located away from the primary street, either to the side or rear of the building. And this is to take advantage of alleys where present in downtown. We've certainly had some projects recently that did not have the advantage of an alley, but where we do have an alley grid present and one that functions, we do certainly like to see those accesses taken from the alley. It minimizes interruption in the pedestrian network on streets, especially a busy street like Idaho. It promotes traffic safety and reduces conflicts as well. In addition to that, I understand the applicant's conversations with ACHD that they would support access in that existing driveway, but typically want to include this policy from ACHD that they typically would not allow access from an arterial. They would want to see it from the street with the lesser functional classification, which in this case would be 12th Street, or from the existing alley. There is a condition in the memo that was distributed to the committee that we do recommend that access on Idaho Street be eliminated and the access remain from the alley. Beyond the change to the site plan, adding that access on Idaho Street, the submitted work session materials really do they do what the condition asked of the applicant, which is clarify details of the building and proposed materials. So they've submitted drawings and have some materials tonight for you to be able to take a look at and inspect that clarify exactly what those materials are. The first of those is the glass proposed for the building, clarifying that the majority of the structure is a silvery glass with some accent areas near the balconies with the darker blue glass. They've submitted samples for your review and some drawings that also illustrate that. Again, here's the materials on the tower with that silvery blue on the majority of the building, the darker blue glass accenting those balconies. The landscaping at the podium was a topic of discussion at the last hearing. What exactly was proposed there? They have clarified on that podium that there will be some private patio space for those apartments that daylight onto that podium. And then on one side of the building, there is the proposal for 5 trees in 36-inch deep planters to provide some vegetative interest. And you can see that there in the rendering on the left side of the screen. The amenity deck plan has had more details submitted as well, showing some outdoor fitness, gathering areas, pool, and also some vegetation on both levels of the amenity deck as requested. Details of the exterior wall have been submitted. The glass balcony system. Details have been shown that it will be a painted steel structure with glass panels enclosing the balcony. The garage was certainly, a topic of discussion, what that fabric screening will ultimately look like. The applicant has samples present tonight, and they have provided some more detailed renderings about what that material ends up looking like. That proposed fabric has I don't want to misstate this, I believe a 36% clear vision through it. And then the rest would be opaque. So allowing some light to shine through, which is demonstrated in their exterior renderings with the lighting, but also preventing, direct viewing of vehicles and some screening. And again, that graphic element that mimics the top of the building is included on the garage for some additional interest. The exterior lighting details have also been submitted. There are sconces on the columns, mostly on the ground floor. Some parking garage fixtures have been depicted, and then also the required street lights, or the historic street lights within the streetscape. Some more detailed renderings of the elevation of the building, kind of highlighting some details and construction methods with the retail structure shown here. A glass storefront system, some painted metal louvers, and some painted metal canopies extending over the public right-of-way. The residential entry has been enhanced to have a significant overhang with some wood paneling underneath to give some pedestrian scale and texture, and really call attention to that pedestrian entry for the residents. That is the end of my presentation. The applicant will certainly go into greater detail on the proposed materials. They have samples available for you here tonight. Again, the submitted materials we feel do satisfy the conditions of the work session and provide those detailed materials that were requested. The only condition that we would recommend is that the access on Idaho Street be eliminated to comply with the plans that you saw in November, and all access taken from the alley. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Questions for Josh at this point? Seeing none, I didn't. Oh, yeah, Brian.
I'd just like to clarify with the entrance off of Idaho, did ACHD weigh in the affirmative on that?
I'll let Mr. Chairman, committee member Erstad, I'll let the applicant weigh in on. I haven't spoken to ACHD myself. Okay. My understanding is that verbally they communicate support for that entrance because there is an existing curb cut on Idaho Street.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? Seeing none at this time, I'd invite the applicant forward, please. And if you wouldn't mind, please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. Jeremy Malone with Oppenheimer Development, 877 Main Street, Suite 700, Boise, Idaho, 83702. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you so much to Josh and all the city efforts for their tremendous support and availability as we've navigated from November to this point today. We appreciate your time to review the application and believe our project has better design qualities today than it did in November based on your comments. We also appreciate the staff support and recommendation of approval with the exception of the ingress off Idaho Street. We would like to make a couple of points regarding that for your thoughts and discussion. Maybe we'll take a quick step back. Is a reminder, we have 300 units in our 298, I'll round up because I'm not a finance guy, 300 units in the project, and it's a 400 space parking garage. So assuming we'll use a 1-to-1 ratio, we anticipate we'll have at least 100 parking spaces for public use. We're working with CCDC on garage sharing, if you will, to make it truly a public garage for the better good of the West End neighborhood. The idea of the ingress off of Idaho Street came actually post our original design review application, and we met with a parking consultant. And they said, if you are going to have, 100 plus spaces in a garage, you need to make sure it's visible, accessible, and easy to access and see. So hence why this has now come up post our original application. The idea behind this is we were using the existing curb cut that's been off of Idaho for quite some time. And also the safety of the garage, to have 400 cars potentially come in and out off of a relatively narrow alley was quite concerning. So we thought having an ulterior entrance into the garage would make sense. With that, we understand Blueprint Boise's desire for the free flow on Idaho streets and main streets for access. So partly that's the reason why we did ingress only with no egress. We figured the majority of the traffic coming into the building from Idaho heading westward, I guess in the mornings, if you will, per se, is actually probably going the opposite direction of normal traffic into the core. So we felt ingress only was probably most appropriate. So we didn't add to the element of egress at 5 o'clock traffic. And to Mr. Erstad's question, ACHD did send a written approval that they would accept this. And then we've had the discussions with the city. So with that, any questions?
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. Do you know what the distance from 11th and 12th Street would be for that entry? It's about mid-block, or is it,
It is probably closer to 11th and 12th. And I say that only because I believe the Record Exchange has 2 of the lots.
Yeah.
So I'd assume 100 feet from 11th and probably 200 from 12th. On a globe, it's just.
No, thank you. That
Yeah.
helps me.
The thoughts, comments? Yep. Mr. Stead?
Mr. Chair, I think that those are a lot of excellent considerations that you've put into it. Ultimately, I think, in the longest of terms, it's probably not ideal to have an entry there. At the same time, the fact that it's an existing curb cut, we've got 16-foot wide alleys throughout the city, which is very well short of a two-way flow. So I think easing the burden off of the alley system is in the immediate and intermediate term, probably a worthwhile pursuit. So I'm not personally opposed to the inclusion of that ingress.
And you guys have a new floor plan too, right? In your, that we can look at it. I think you brought it up shortly there for a minute, but do you have that available? Or you guys can walk through your presentation anyway?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. We may have more questions after that. Any other questions for your applicant until that time? Great.
Yeah, sure.
My name is Nolan Sitz. I'm at 95 Yester Way in Seattle, Suite 200. I'm with SCB Idaho, and then virtually we have Lindsay Von Segern with SCB, and then Brenda with Site Design, and she's the landscape architect. We're both excited to be back in front of the committee to present the evolution of our project. So just to quickly remind you of the program, we're about 300 residential units on top of 390 parking spaces for a total of 27 floors. We pushed the amenity to the top of the building to capitalize on views, and we sculpted the top to recreate the silhouettes of a mountain. We were last here November 10th and fortunate to receive approval with conditions. The board was interested in further understanding materials and exterior details, lighting around the building, and landscaping. Starting with exterior materials of the tower, we're proposing 2 glass types. The first is a silvery blue glass proposed as a VRE 146. This makes up 80% of the tower and is intended to highlight the form of the building. The second is a dark blue glass proposed as VUE 26-50. That's used in the slot of the balconies to accent the breaks in the building. We did bring physical samples. They're laid out down over here at the base, but we thought it'd be easier just to show you real building examples of what the glass looks like in different conditions. So this is a building we completed in Baltimore a couple of years back. The reflective glass is silvery blue, while the dark blue is the accent. Notice how the glass types keep the form of the building intact, but are very complementary to one another. I lost my space here. And this is another building we completed located in Chicago with the same glass. And what's nice about this glass is how dynamic it is. It can be very transparent on some sides, mirrored on others, and take on the colors of the sky during sunrise and sunset. Starting at the top of the building, we did some enlarged renderings so that you can see some of the finer detail of the building and how it comes together. On the far right is the mechanical screen that will conceal the cooling towers and equipment. And as you move down the elevation of the glass, it drops and it becomes the guardrail and screen wall for tenants. We like keeping the screen wall tall because it blocks wind and makes the spaces comfortable on the deck. Moving down, we wanted to show you a rendering of the typical wall and section. It's silvery blue, dark blue at the ends, and then a clear glass guardrail on top of the balconies. Moving down into the podium is our graphic silhouettes of the mountains. We're proposing a printed pattern of charcoal, gray, and white fabric for the garage. What we like about this material is it creates a strong visual screen on the exterior while being very transparent on the interior, bringing in lots of natural light. These are some installed pictures of what the finished product could look like, both on the outside and inside. This is the residential entry. It's located on 12th, centered in the building. We created a metal portal that sits over a granite base with a wood canopy to signify the entrance. Moving to the retail storefront, we're showing a very clear glass and aluminum with integrated sunscreen. In our experience, transparency at the ground level is good for both retailers and an active streetscape. It's also in line with good environmental design. Columns are spaced every 27 feet, giving the base of the building a nice rhythm. This is an evening rendering of the podium with the residential entry off of 12th and retail off of Idaho. Above it, we anticipate the garage having a slight glow from the lighting on the inside. You'll see different shades of gray against the silhouette, keeping the facade very active day or night. Looking at the light fixtures, we're specifying a luminaire in the parking garage that reflects light off of the ceiling and reduces hot spots. At the ground floor, we're proposing black vertical sconces at the columns and entry in the lobby. We're also showing the historic streetlights along Idaho and 12th. As far as lighting, this is where we're showing it in plan. We're also adding a couple of sconces along the alley to keep that well lit and safe. One change we're proposing that we already talked about is at the ground floor, the vehicular entry off of Idaho, which we talked about previously. So that's that last purple arrow at the bottom. So that's an existing curb cut. It's about 11 feet wide, and you're right, it's about 200 feet to the north and probably a little bit more than 100 feet to the south. So it's very, very mid-block. Along Idaho, we have class 3 trees spaced approximately every 27 feet. The first 3 are espressos and the second 3 are white oaks. And then along 12th, we're proposing 3 sweet gums, which are class 2. Moving up to the top of the podium, we have those 5 trees positioned over the columns. They're multi-stemmed ornamental trees, 5 to 8 canes that will mature to about 12 feet tall with a 10-foot canopy. They're white most of the season and will turn red in autumn. Finally, moving to the top of the building, we have 2 levels, 26 and 27. 26 is the main amenity level. On the deck, we have various seating groups, barbecue, a place to stretch, and pool. As for landscaping, we're proposing trees around the pool to create some shade for residents and a cluster of trees at 27 near the hot tub to create privacy. This is an updated rendering of the top. The main amenity level is at 26, while the more private one is at 27. Architecturally, we think the signature top will make a beautiful statement on the Boise skyline, especially with foothills in the back. Lastly, we wanted to show you an overall image of the Boise skyline with our building superimposed in it. And that's it. So thank you for your time, and we're ready to open up to any questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Questions right now from the committee for the applicant? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Erstad.
is there a structural reason that there are not trees along the top, out to the corners?
No. Well, yes and no. So we don't like putting trees in corners because we would like to reserve those for the views. So if we have trees, we like to put them inward. But generally in these buildings, we like to keep them on columns because if you put them in between columns, the drag on the structure and everything you have to do to reinforce it makes it very difficult.
Right.
Do you mind bringing up one of those pieces of the fabric? I know it's kind of passed that around. I think the glass we can kind of see over here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Stone.
one further point of clarification on the screen. That wraps around 3 sides, correct?
Yeah. So that's on Idaho, it's on 12th. And then it's basically the alley as well. There's one portion where we have to keep open. And that's just to maintain the openness of the garage. And then along the interior lot line, that's got to be a fire rated wall. So
Right.
that had to be CMU.
Okay, I just hadn't seen a rendering from the south, so it was not clear. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
So on the site plan, it was showing where you had the points of ingress egress. There was a arrow off of 12th Street and it said parking entry. Is that the entry into the alley? Or is there a separate parking structure entry? Yeah.
So the one at the top over there, that's for the elevators.
Okay.
So for the commercial parking spaces, this is non-residents. That's where they come up and come down into the building.
Okay. Yeah, just the parking. I wasn't sure if that arrow was pointing. Like if there was a separate garage entry there, that just goes to those elevators.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was basically the only thing that changed this time was the so the retail space continued all the way to basically the neighboring building Propor, right?
Mhm.
So all the access was coming off of the alley. The alley is basically one way. I'm walking through this and with the column layout, I'm guessing that's going to be permanently an entrance only due to the width of that lane. True. Is that true?
Yeah, we did look at it as a two-way in and out, but we had the same reaction. We wanted to be very sensitive to Idaho and do the right thing. And we thought, well, it's just 11 feet, and if we make it more of a driveway instead of a true curb cut, it's a little bit safer and better for pedestrians.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Is there, so when looking at, once you're up in the parking structure, let's say that there was some sort of issue where, people, like an emergency situation where people couldn't get out into the alley, is there a way for that traffic to get routed through that if they ever had to come out onto Idaho, like from inside the parking structure, like come down the ramp and come out to Idaho? Because I think that's, along the lines of what committee member Erstad was talking about. I think that, and just personally, having only one point of ingress, egress with that many parking spots and the only place they go is the alley seems a little challenging if there ever was an emergency. I don't know if this really compromises the design. I think that it's fairly appropriate.
Asking if they can back out of the.
Yeah, well, not back out, but like if they were up in there and they couldn't go down the out
sure they
ramp, could
probably
they go
could.
down the
Yeah.
in ramp to
Mhm. I
get
think
out?
So you're right.
Yeah.
So that portion, the in from the alley and the in from Idaho, they converge into one ramp, and it's also the exit ramp. So if we needed to, they could get out in the event of emergency.
And I know we're showing a single retail entry, but is it the thought that you could have multiple retail entries all the way down? Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I figured.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry, to follow up on that, so the chairman asked if it's possible to have multiple retail entries. Is it going to be designed to have multiple entries?
Yeah, so we're not showing it, but we should be showing a door every other bay. That's what we're sort of anticipating. So the bays are 27 feet, so
Okay.
it's about every 54. We were going to put a door, but really, we think it kind of depends on who leases the space, if they want more square footage or less. We'd like to kind of tailor it for them.
And the doors will all face Idaho.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
As you mentioned, you'll have an excess of parking for other people in the community to use. And as I think you said, the parking entry coming off Idaho Street, or excuse me, 12th Street, those bank of elevators there were to serve not the residential function, but those other 100 spots or so, whatever the balance is. Where would those spots be located? What floor would, and within the structure, are they going to have a designated floor that they go to?
Yeah, it's the first 3 floors.
First 3 floors?
Yeah.
Okay, so if okay, and would that, I don't have does the parking garage portion, I don't have that in this floor plan. I can't see. Does that cover that floor plate that we see here now, or is it a, because I'm thinking that if I come in as a non-resident and want to park in the garage on one of those 3 floors, the only access I have to my car later on, or wherever I want to go from leaving my car, is going to be at that northwest or that corner location there. Okay. Okay.
Other thoughts or questions for the applicant? But do you want to take a look at any of the other materials or anything? Is the wood material actually, is that like a composite aluminum or a? Okay. Yeah, sure. Don't mess that around. Other questions, Ben? The landscape question?
Yeah, I guess I was the one that brought up the landscape. I like the tree choices. We've had a couple on structure projects, and I think that the multi-stem, kind of more class 1 ornamentals where they're really exposed there, I think are appropriate. It allows for replacement a little bit easier and I would assume you have some sort of maintenance agreement where those would get replaced and, through that. Okay. Yeah, I like the tree choice. They'll do very well here. So, and then the rooftop, I can understand where those mature sizes are a little smaller just because they're constrained a little with their root systems. And, but yeah, I don't mind them being away from the edge. I understand what you're talking about and the way your columns lay too. That's kind of the initial hearing. We talked about having those over the columns just because of structural issues. And then, any irrigation and drainage you guys are handling with like internal drained out and running down like a storm drain or something like that, that would carry like the other roof drainage that falls on this.
Mhm.
Okay.
Did you have an elevation that shows the entry to the garage, the new one off there? Get off the perspective.
Yeah.
May have missed it.
It's
like
a
right there.
Flat on elevation, but yeah.
Maybe sheet 24 also looks like a perspective. Maybe.
Gotcha. It keeps in pretty good rhythm with the rest of the retail kind of coming across that front. Is that showing a door? Whether it has, if it's public, will it have a door, you think?
It won't have a door.
Okay.
No, it'll just be open.
Gotcha. No, I think it looks good. I guess the only other concerns we've had a couple of those garages like that is just, especially you have that kind of subtle light coming in from the garage, which I think could be a pretty cool effect on that. And that sometimes it's a little easy to overlight that entry to, so it kind of just kind of glares out there, but I'm sure you guys will look at that closely. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to make sure that there are indeed as many possible entrances on Idaho Street into the building, both to keep the rhythm of the retail going and because we've had a terrible, I'll call it terrible, building along Main Street that has a lot of glass that doesn't have any entrances, and it keeps, how shall I say this? It makes the pedestrian experience less than pleasant and is not inviting. And so this is the largest building to be built in our downtown. And I just want to make sure that it is pedestrian friendly, and not only can you see in it, but you see that there are doors to come in and out, that it feels friendly.
Yeah, is that a modular system where you could pop out a piece of the storefront and replace it with the door at a future time as needed?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Is the grade pretty flat across that part of the building? Do you know? Can you put doors across? It's
Mr. Chair.
Can you hear my voice here? This is Lindsay.
Yep,
Oh, hi,
we can hear
Lindsay.
you, Lindsay.
Hi. I'm just chiming in here. The grade is relatively flat. It's only about a 6-inch change through along this Idaho Street access. So we certainly are going to anticipate, we're at least anticipating probably 2 retailers come in here. So I think, as Nolan was mentioning, 2 or 3 doors will likely be in this final design. And the grade change will solve for, it's relatively minor through that elevation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, you asked for comments as well, and I just want to reiterate what I think I said in November, that this is a really exciting project, and I think you guys have done a great job thinking about details and thinking about the way that this is going to integrate into our community, and I just want to commend you on that. I hope that those that follow take your example.
Well said. Well, if there aren't any other questions for the applicant, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Just bring it back to discussion and a recommendation. Josh?
Mr. Chairman, just
Yeah.
one quick process clarification. We want to see if any members of the public.
Oh,
want to
yes.
speak.
Sorry. Thank you for bringing that up. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify on this particular project tonight? Seeing none in the audience. Any online? Okay. Thank you, Josh. With that, any last word or questions for the applicant? Applicant, anything last statements you want to make? Great. Well, we'll close the public portion of the testimony or hearing tonight and bring it back to the committee for discussion and a motion. I appreciate all the efforts that were put forth and bringing in sizable materials. That's very helpful, especially with the fabric, which is something a little bit new here tonight too. Otherwise, I'm good with everything they have, the attention to detail, the 2 colors of glass that they put, so I don't think I have any opposition to all the things that we've asked. The only piece that I think is of any discussion would be the access point. And I understand, our position of trying to limit that, but as stated earlier, the narrowness of the alleyway, having this as a single ingress instead of one way in, I think it's safer than having a 2-way piece coming out of there. And I feel like I'm in support of leaving the access as shown and presented tonight. But other thoughts?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I think that just the it's one way going west. You take a left in and then you're exiting out into the alley anyway. I think it's appropriate for it's pretty standard for that to happen along Idaho through most of these retail and residential buildings. So, I'd be supportive of leaving that in, especially with ACHD chiming in saying that they would be supportive of it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I agree with that as well. And I think it's a lot safer to have an ingress there so that it's the car's responsibility to look out for pedestrians instead of pedestrians having to look out for somebody who's leaving. And I want to echo what Committee Member Ersted said. I appreciate the use of high quality materials and the attention to detail, and really just that you bothered to put together a beautiful, well, it's the first time I'm going to say tower because this is actually a tower. And I hope that this is a great example for other people, that we don't build cheap in Boise, we build quality. So thank you for setting that example.
Well, with that, anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mrs. Ball.
I think everybody has said what a good project this is, and we look forward to seeing it break ground. With that, I would move to approve the updated work session drawings dated and received on January 25th, 2022, per the discussion and findings contained in the work session memo for the hearing dated February 9th, with the deletion of the exception indicated in the memo, so that the access from Idaho Street would remain in the project.
Second.
And seconded, any discussion on the motion? It's clear. Great. Christina, want to please call the roll?
Simple, Bala,
Aye.
Marsh.
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Merced.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Now we have a presentation on the zoning code rewrite effort. We have some members of the comprehensive planning and community engagement team here tonight to speak with you. So I'll turn it over to them.
Great. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee. For the record, Andrea Tuning. It's good to see each of you this evening doing good work and making the city better. That is exactly why we are here to speak with you this evening. In 2019, the city began an endeavor to write our zoning code in hopes that we could make it better. We've been periodically meeting with you as we've moved forward through the process. And tonight we wanted to give you an update in regard to the schedule, give you a little update regarding major changes, as well as introduce you a little bit to the public engagement plan that we have in order to make this a successful project. Knowing we have limited time, I'm going to go through it really quickly so that we have time for any types of questions that you might have. As I noted, we began the process in 2019, and as part of our scope of work, we divided the larger project into 3 modules or installments. That first module looked at the zoning districts and the allowed uses that could occur within those zoning districts. Draft module 1 was released in April of 2021, and we had an extensive community engagement endeavor from that. But we've now moved on to module 2, which is really the details of the project, which is really what's important to the design review committee. And so that really talks about those development and design standards that are required, and really talk about the quality of what happens to a building, where that building is placed in regard to property lines, where parking is located, in regard to the street, all in an effort to make the project the best that it can be and contribute to the overall urban fabric. Then once that's completed, we'll move on to module 3, which is really how those developments get approved. So which bodies are reviewing those, so which you'll have an opportunity to review and approve, who gets to participate in the process and when they participate, as well as the structural process. So when they submit their application, the overall hearing process, as well as the appeals process. We are currently beginning our citywide outreach as part of draft module 2. Draft module 2 was released at the end of January. So February, March, and April are going to be a heavy lift, and we're going to be out in the community talking to our community, our elected and appointed officials, as well as our development community as to what their thoughts and reactions are in regard to draft module 2. But while we're out doing that, we're also going to be drafting draft module 3, as well as getting everything prepared as we move forward, because after we have all of our community engagement for module 2, release module 3 and have that outreach, we're going to create a consolidated plan. So that's going to be us putting together each one of those installments into a single document so that we can see how all of them interact with one another. So once we have that completed, we will go ahead and open that up again to make sure that our community, our elected and appointed officials, as well as our development community, have an opportunity to provide comment and recommendations in regard to that. So we'll go ahead and release that full draft code. We do have hopes that by the fall or winter of 2022, we will have a complete document that's ready for submittal, and that'll begin our process. Through the public hearing process, we'll be able to visit with Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation moving on to City Council for final approval. We are shooting for an adoption date of July of 2023. So we wanted to go over just a little bit about what's happening with Module 2, some of those key changes. There'll be a number of minor changes that occur, but we're going to kick you off and let you know what those major changes are. I'm going to hand it over to Deanna Dupuy with our Housing Division.
Thanks, Andrea. Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna Dupuy, and I'm going to go over these changes pretty quickly. We've bucketed them into 8 changes, and they're very high level. So, and this is exactly the same content that we're sharing with our community. As committee members, I'm sure you'll want to dig more deeply into it, and we'd love to have your feedback, on the day-to-day practitioner level. So our first change that we're communicating to the public is that our update of dimensional requirements, specifically around minimum lot size, almost in all residential zones, we have reduced that minimum lot size for a single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, and townhome. And we believe that smaller lot sizes increase diversity of housing type as well as neighborhood income diversity. And we're hoping that this more compact development will reduce sprawl. In addition to the minimum lot requirement updates, we've also removed the calculation for density. We recognize that density is just one simple attempt to quantify the impact of a new development, but that there are various ways to measure that. And we want to focus more on design and performance criteria. So making sure that that building is the right height, that it has enough parking, that is situated correctly on the property. And those are going to be our guiding posts or the objective criteria instead of a number of no maximum units per acre. And I think that this picture shows a good example. And as committee members, you probably know better than most, that the buildings may look exactly the same, but there's different numbers of kitchens. And sometimes our code will just require that, too many units, so it can't get built. On the flip side, though, we want to make sure that we are providing predictability to our residents. So we're building into our zoning code existing neighborhood protection standards. And this is by requiring additional setbacks or reduced height for a certain amount of distance to provide that predictability for residents to understand as new, more intensive developments, such as larger apartments or commercial buildings come in. I know that my shade, that my sunlight, that noise will be reasonably mitigated. We also have included a new incentive. We do already have incentives in our zoning code, but specifically in an attempt to reduce the harms of new development on our environment. So we've added the sustainable and resilient development, which we offer a parking incentive in exchange for certain certifications and for water or energy savings. This one is an exciting one for our community on all sides, but we are updating our parking standards for single family, duplex, triplex, and fourplexes to require, or the proposal is to require only one off-street parking spot instead of 2. There's a lot of different reasons for this. We've looked at our community. Not everyone owns 2 cars and not all housing units have 2 cars. So we're by mandating 2 units, we're making people pay for parking that they may not need to use, as well as advancing some of our environmental goals by reducing the potential for large amounts of pavement. And instead, we could see more pervious surfaces being built. And that as we move forward as a city, we don't want to continually increase our dependency on vehicles, but to start exploring a more multimodal community. This may also be relevant for the committee. We are expanding and actually codifying our building and design criteria. So putting these citywide design guidelines into our code, and so that they apply to all properties across the city. In addition, we've added a new section that is specifically about promoting access and connectivity. We all know there's a lot of best practices in site design that help advance pedestrian safety and just general vehicle circulation and efficient circulation. So we've collated all of that and actually are putting that into our code so that we can advance those goals. And then our last change is, again, creating a new section called operations and maintenance. There's often a lot of times where we have conditions of approval, such as landscaping, trees, and that they need to be maintained long-term. And so we're actually, providing some teeth to our conditions in which that we can hold this up to make sure that landscaping is maintained for the long term. And I know I went through that quick and there's a lot of information in there, but that's just the high level, and we'd be happy to have any conversation on that later. But before we get into that, I'll let Lindsay cover how we're communicating this to our community.
Thanks, Deanna. I'd now like to present the community engagement plan for Module 2 of the zoning code rewrite. We learned from Module 1 that it was important for us to focus on the quality of the conversations with the community, and if that means taking our time with the strategic community engagement plan, then we should do so. Zoning is technical and a confusing topic and can be difficult to understand. We needed to break down the zoning code and find a way to have meaningful and personal conversations with Boiseans. So in advance of the release of Module 2, we put together a couple documents. The first one is a document called How to Read Module 2. This really guides the community on how to read it. Specifically looking at topics that might be of interest to them, not necessarily reading it, maybe from front to cover. A 400-page document can be intimidating. We also want to provide a few reference points, as you can see on the right. A lot of times people might not understand when we reference 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet. So we want to give a few fun Idaho-focused reference points. When you think 20 feet, think the length of a whitewater raft, or think 5 feet, think the length of a mountain bike. The second document that we put together was the executive summary that covered exactly what Deanna did, just giving a scope of where we've been and where we are now, including Blueprint Boise, and then those 8 major proposed changes and a little bit of reasoning of what guided us to those changes. The third is the interactive conversion map. This was made by through the GIS system that you can navigate around. You'll see the proposed zoning code districts on the left and then the current on the right. There's also a legend that works with this. We have it available in PDF format as well, but people can zoom in, zoom out, type in their own address, and it gives all the details of those current zones and the proposed zones. We started our community outreach last night on the central bench, and we will be out in the community throughout February, March, and April. As you can see, we're headed to each of the planning areas. We have specific examples that we're providing the community on what this might mean for their neighborhood. We also have 4 general facing community outreach, a couple on Zoom, and then also 2 that are focused on housing and zoning code. In the winter, when we were having a lot of housing outreach, zoning code seemed to come up a lot in the conversation with those. So we thought it was important to kind of bridge the gap and have those conversations together. In addition, we've been meeting with other more technical groups internally. We just spoke today with the ULI, and we have a lot more scheduled throughout the coming months as well. One big portion of what we're trying to do is connect our why and having more of a larger conversation in a more holistic way. That includes, how the housing needs analysis and the climate action roadmap intersect with the zoning code rewrite. These are 2 specific examples that we are providing to the community. We'll provide 1 commercial and 1 residential for each planning area. And then we'll have call outs within each of those highlighting some of the different changes, whether that's trees, whether that's setbacks, building height, etc. We will have 2 surveys that will be available February 24th to April 10th. The first one is a technical user survey, which is people that use it, the zoning code on a more regular basis, architects, planners, and builders. And then we took that survey and broke it down into a more community-focused language that is a community survey that will also be translated in Spanish. Those will be out and available in the community February 24th. We'll have lots of posters around town as well. And you can see as we released module 2, we began our outreach, and we'll have our surveys open February 24th through April 10th. And our next citywide advisory committee meeting is February 17th. That's next week. And with that, we'll stand for any questions you might have.
Great, thanks for the update. Any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Stein.
I'm sure that this is either under consideration or is certainly within the near term for consideration, but the mechanism for altering a zone would still remain relatively similar, like a rezone or anything like that.
Committee President Marsh, Committee Member Erstad, that's actually part of Module 3, so we haven't really gotten that far. But typically, we will be following Local Land Use Planning Act as our guiding document. So typically in that regard, planning and zoning is a recommending body with City Council being your final determination.
So for the part of this clarification, will Blueprint Boise get touched during this process, or that's its own thing that influences the process but does not define it, and the process does not define Blueprint Boise?
Just as a follow-up, the zoning code rewrite is a separate entity above and beyond what the comprehensive plan will do. So those are 2 separate documents. So we currently have the existing 2011 Boise City Comprehensive Plan that is remaining in existence. The zoning code rewrite is actually the tool to help us implement that vision and those goals that are established there. Now we are working on, if there are amendments to the comprehensive plan, which are supposed to be done regularly according to code and to state statute, we're working on creating that calendar to when those happen, how they happen, and to ensure that we are keeping up to date, that we're reaching for higher goals, and that the city can be the best that it can be.
Awesome, thank you. Just a sidebar, I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. It's a heavy lift just coming through the code to try and figure out what you need to do, much less coming through the code to figure out how you can improve upon it. So I'm very impressed by the work. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a very specific question to ask. So I saw the proposed parking reduction, and I have heard quite a few complaints from people, especially in the north end, who are required to have driveways into detached garages, and that the driveway doesn't count as a parking pad. Are you looking into that as well when you're looking into parking reduction requirements?
Chairman Marsh, Committee Member Zuckerman. So we're evaluating off-street parking. We are currently at the location of outside of the required setbacks to evaluate it in that regard. So if it is a front-loaded unit, you would still have a 20-foot setback to ensure that living space is toward the street, parking behind that facade of that building, so that the living space is the predominant feature. Now, if it's alley loaded, it's a completely different scenario. So you would not have a front loaded, and then you, of course, would not have a typical driveway. So even when we say, hey, there might be the opportunity for a single front loaded parking stall, you would still have the driveway apron functioning as a second space or a visitor space.
I'm referring to alley loaded, that like east end and north end style garages that currently require a certain amount of feet of driveway that feed into that garage. Is that going to be reassessed?
So currently, I think, and maybe I'll need to follow up with that. So currently you have an apron that is required from the edge of the alley, but typically that is only enough to provide sufficient backup space, which would be 22 feet. So we are evaluating, all of the dimensional standards. At this point, we are recommending a 22-foot backup space for any vehicle. So whether that would be in a commercial drive aisle or within an alley, you would still have the apron.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And thanks for all your hard work. Appreciate it. And thanks for the update. We certainly look forward to these report outs.
Well, thank you. And please participate in any of the community engagement events that we have. On February 24th, we'll be having that survey that's out. So if you have any recommendations or comments that you'd like to provide, make sure that you forward those on. We want to make it a good document. This is an important one to get right.
Great, thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'll just real quickly run through the agenda. About time to get the meeting started. So as documented in your packets, we are recommending deferral on the first three items. Items 1, 2, and 3 will be deferred.
What's the date on that? Do you remember off the top of your head? It's
The date specific would be March 9th.
March 9th. Okay.
Number 4, we would propose for the consent agenda. Number 5, we would propose for the consent agenda. Number 6 is a last minute deferral. The applicant would like to make some changes. It's just too late to accommodate tonight. So we would recommend deferral of number 6. Again, date specific, March 9th. And then we will hear number 7.
Great. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I will be recusing myself from number 7 completely in any discussion or decision making, as my firm is the representative for the owner.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to discuss item 4.
Okay. Take it off consent and we'll hear it tonight.
Okay, and with that, it's 6 o'clock. We can get started.
Great. Thanks, Josh. Welcome. And I'd like to call the February 9th, 2022 Design Review Committee to order. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Temple,
Here.
Zabala,
Here.
Marsh,
Here.
Zuckerman,
Here.
Hurstad,
Here.
5 present, 2 absent.
Next item is just look to take a motion for the approval of the January 12th, 2022 minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
I move approval of the Design Review Committee minutes from the January 12th, 2022 hearing.
Moved. Second. Thank you, Mr. Zabala. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Temple,
Aye.
Zabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Hurstad,
Aye.
motion carries.
Great. Well, tonight we have 4 items up for deferral. First item to be considered for our deferral is item number 1. That's DRH 21-00378. Location is 6259 South Pleasant Valley Road. It's for the construction of a new approximately 1,080,289 square foot warehouse and distribution center with 98 truck docks and associated site improvements on a property pending in an M1D zone. And this would be deferred to the March 9th hearing. Is there any member of the audience or online wishing to speak to this item who cannot make the March 9th date? Seeing none in person. Any on Josh? Nope. With that, we'll move this to the deferral list. Second item to be considered is item number 2, which is DRH 21-00441. Its location is 2500 East Freight Street. It's for the construction of a new approximately 185,300 square foot industrial building with associated site improvements on a property in the M2D zone. Again, is there any member of the public who cannot make the March 9th date that is wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none in person, any online, Josh? No. So that item 2 will be considered for deferral. Next is item number 3, DRH 21-00448. Location is 1201 West Grove Street for the construction of a new approximately 7-story multifamily residential building with 305 units, structured parking, and associated site improvements on a property located in a C5DD zone. Again, is there any member of the audience or online wishing to speak to this item who cannot make the March 9th date for deferral? Seeing none in person, any online, Josh? Thank you. Last item for our deferral tonight will be item number 6. It's DRH 22-00004. Location is 12249 West Executive Drive. It's for the construction of a new approximately 29,400 square foot single-story industrial building with associated site improvements on a property in an M1D zone. And again, is there any member of the public audience here or online wishing to speak to this item who cannot make the March 9th hearing date? Seeing none in person, Josh, any online? Those complete our items to be for our deferral tonight. And with that, I would be open for a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Ball.
I would move for deferral to our March 9th, 2022 hearing meeting date for agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 6.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, Christina, will you please call the roll?
Semple,
Aye.
Sabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
We have one item up for consent agenda tonight. That item to be considered for our consent agenda is item number 5. It's DRH 22-00006. Location is 7031 South Eisman Road. It's for the construction of 3 new industrial buildings totaling approximately 392,000 square feet with associated site improvements on a property in an M1D zone. Is the applicant present tonight?
Yes, Eric Gramacki with Flint Development is present.
Great, thank you. And are you in agreement with recommended conditions of approval?
We are in agreement.
Please let the record show the applicant is in agreement. And are there any members of the public in person or online that are wishing to testify in opposition to this item tonight? Seeing none in person, Josh, any online? No. So that item will be considered for our consent agenda, and that's the only item for our consent agenda. So at this point, I would take a vote, or excuse me, I would take a motion on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Zabala.
I would move for approval of DRH 22-00006, subject to the findings of fact and the conclusions of law and the recommended conditions of approval as indicated in the staff report.
Okay, so moved.
Second.
Seconded. Thank you, Ms. Simple. Any discussion on the consent agenda motion? Hearing none, Christina, will you please call the roll?
Semple,
Aye.
Sabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you. The first item to be heard tonight is item number, 4. DRH 21-00494. Location is 1509 North Wildwood Way. And with that, I would turn it over to staff presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the committee members. My name is Rachel Farrell, and I'm the design review planner for this project. And before you tonight, this is Dance Unlimited case number 21-00494. So the project is located at 1509 Wildwood Way. on the corner of Gabriel Drive and is proposing to construct a 19,200 square foot commercial structure to serve as a dance studio with associated hardscape and landscape improvements. The site currently contains 0.64 acres, but under a separate permit would consolidate the lot directly west of the site to result in a total of 1.01 acres. Project is located in the C2D zone and is designated commercial, surrounded by a similar commercial development to the north, west, and east, with residential to the south. The project proposes to provide 49 total parking spaces, 2 of those being ADA accessible with 5 bicycle parking spaces. Access would be taken off both Wildwood Way and Gabriel Drive, with cross access available to the site directly west. Pedestrian connectivity is shown to provide access from the right of way on Gabriel Drive to the front entrance on the south facade. The first floor of the building contains 5 dance studios, waiting room, restroom, merchandise store, office, and break room. The second floor would include 5 studios, waiting room, and a restroom. The landscape plans show adequate class 2 street trees on both frontages, island and terminal planters throughout the parking lot, and pedestrian connection to the entrance of the building from Gabriel Drive. Here are some elevations on the south and west showing different building materials and textures. And here are some digital renderings of the project with some height changes and different size windows, color and material changes. So staff finds the project complies with section 11-03-04.12 of the zoning ordinance, the design review guidelines, and the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan, and would recommend approval with conditions. This concludes staff presentation, and myself and the applicant are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
On a vast majority of projects that cross the city's desk, it seems like the buzzword is new urbanism, and the way that a building addresses the street. Is there no requirement for this building to be connected to the street frontage aside from nominal pedestrian pathways around the sizable parking field?
Mr. Chairman and Committee Member Erstad. So within this area, there are no specific block frontage requirements and parking requirements. So normally, like if you were to go up a block on Fairview, there's a requirement to have the store coming up towards the street with parking towards the side and the rear. In this location, you don't have that requirement. We did, however, reach out to the applicant and ask if this would be something that could be considered, and they responded. So if you'd like that response, maybe they could speak to that.
I would love that response.
Richard, do you mind bringing up that area one time real quick, just to take a look at that? I think it's slide number 2. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff at the moment? Great. Is the applicant present? Yes. Yes, please, if you'd like to come forward and present, state your name and address for the record, if you would, when you're able.
Commissioner, members of the committee, my name is Glenn Walker, 1831 East Overland Road, Meridian, Idaho. As a planner mentioned, that this project is a 2-story dance studio facility for my client, which owns a dance studio literally just about a block to the west of this building. She's leasing the building right now, and then she's going to be wanting to build and construct this new facility. One of the comments that was brought up was if we could shift the building and put parking on the north side. And when I asked the client that, she was like, really, I don't want to do that, because her business is 90%, which is a really high number of drop off and pickup. And she said a lot of her clients don't park there really. That parents come, they drop their students off, and then they come back and pick them up. She said a vast majority of her students are younger age kids, and a good portion of them are females. But so that was one of the reasons why we kind of kept the building where it was at. But we do feel that this building is a very nice looking building. It's off of Fairview. It's not really on Fairview. It's just behind some other buildings that are front Fairview Avenue. We front Gabrielle Drive. And so we feel this building fits the needs of the owners, and feel that it's a good project for this type of development or this type of use.
Great, thank you. Questions for the applicants?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Stead.
I appreciate the implication that visibility is important from the street frontage, particularly Gabrielle Drive and Wildwood Way. I don't know. I agree. This is a handsome building. I think you've done a very good job with 3 of 4 elevations. I am concerned that the elevation that is seen from Fairview Avenue is a blank wall. And in the interest of not increasing cost to your client, I would like to suggest, if not require, that there be some differentiation to the paint along there to kind of at least reference the architectural elements you've included on the other 3 facades.
Yeah, well, let me speak real quick because I brought this up to my client and we've kind of agreed to it, and it didn't show up on these plans, and it was after the fact that we have submitted. We have the corners being wrapped with a high-grade metal siding, and we had talked about doing the same thing on the backside as well. So we plan on actually putting those corner pieces on the backside of the building with the high-grade metal siding that goes up the wall as well, just to kind of break up that northern wall section. So we kind of already talked about that.
Okay. I think I'd personally like to see that that banding around your base be suggested along the top as well, or along the back. Just do what you can to sort of mimic what is present on the front facade.
Yeah.
on the back.
Yeah, we could do that, and we can look at different bands, different within that wall, putting some different band colors in the CMU block. That wall is a CMU block, 1 hour rated wall.
Well, then I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? See none, thank you. Anything else?
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public wishing to testify to this item tonight? Anybody online, Josh? Seeing none. Applicant, any last words that you need to say? Okay, thank you. With that, we'll close the public portion of the hearing and bring it back to the committee for discussion and a motion. I think those are some good comments, Ryan. Good to clarify that with the applicant. Otherwise, I'm fine with the siding of the building personally. So especially kind of keeps the building a little farther away from those residents to the south. So anybody else have any other comments, or certainly entertain a motion if anybody's ready?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Stead.
I move to approve item DRH 21-00494 per the facts, findings, and conclusions of the city staff.
Okay. So moved. And seconded, Ms. Zuckerman. Comments, questions on the discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Christine, will you please call the roll?
Semple,
Aye.
Sabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right, the next item we have to hear tonight is item number 7. And with that, I believe, Mr. Semple, you're recusing yourself.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Item number 7 is DRH 22-00003. Its location is 1722 South Latos Street. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff for their presentation when you're ready.
All right. Good evening. My name is Michaela. Today I'm presenting DRH 22-00003. It's located at 1722 South Latos Street. So it consists of 2 parcels in the northeast corner of the intersection of West Nez Perce Street and South Latos Street. The proposed scope of work is 5 substandard single-family homes located on 6 substandard original lots of record. I just encourage you to take note on this site plan of the north arrow facing right. So lot 11 is the most northern property, and then lot 1516 is the southernmost property. It's next to Nez Perce Street. So as you can see, we've got 1 of the units with an attached garage. All of the access is off the alley for all parking. 4 of the units have 2 garage buildings that share a common wall. All of the homes that are proposed here meet the requirements for lot coverage. Jump to their landscaping. So as you can see, there is some adequate landscaping here. We have front yards along Latos Street for the most part for 4 of the units. On the lot 1516, the open space and part of the yard is located along Nez Perce Street. At the lower, what would that be, southwest corner of this landscaping plan, there was an open space, as you can see on the site plan here. Staff and comprehensive planning recommended that that area be closed off with either fencing or landscaping to discourage access or parking there, which the applicant has complied with. Now I'm going to move on to the elevations. So on the left, elevations here are repeated on lot 11 and lot 13. Lot 11, again, is the northernmost lot. It abuts a partial 2-story structure, which I'll show a picture of in a moment. So the design for all of these substandard lot homes is a full 2-story design. Most of them are a little bit over 23 feet tall, with the midline being 18 feet 3 inches for the most part, or somewhere around there. So they do not meet the definition of the partial 2-story. They are full 2-story homes, which code would not allow on the most northern lot, lot 11, and then lot 1516, which is the most southernmost lot, which we'll get to that. So the left there shows the elevations for lot 11, full 2-story. It's repeated on lot 13. The photos on the right, or the elevations on the right, are 2 of the middle lots, lot 12 and 14. Again, that's a full 2-story structure, which we allow on those internal lots, but it's the external ones that we're concerned with today. So on the left, we have lot 1516. That's the most southern lot along Nez Perce. Across the street, it abuts a 1-story structure, whereas the northernmost abutted a partial 2-story structure. Full 2-story design there again, which staff would recommend reducing to partial 2-story. On the right, I wanted to provide the garage elevation. Staff had no comments on those. So just for your reference, here are the different materials and color blocking that's used, some renderings here, or perspective drawings, so that you can see what these structures look like. It's clear that they're all 2-story designs. However, they do offer a lot in regards to mix of materials that are being used, styling differences, changes in roof line modulation and vertical modulation, along with covered entryways. Again, lot 11 and lot 1516 meet the full 2-story, and they would by code need to meet partial 2-story definitions. So just for your reference, that smaller structure on the right there is the demolished structure and is where the subject properties are located. The structure on the left is the northernmost neighbor to the property, so abutting lot 11. It is a partial 2-story structure. As you can see here, it's utilized additional setbacks to meet that partial 2-story definition, very similar to what's being proposed in this development. Just for your reference, I wanted to provide the neighbor across Nez Perce to the south. So it's clearly a very small single-story structure. I did receive some public opposition to this development. In general, the commenter just provided that there was some damage that occurred to their fencing when the houses were demolished, and they wanted to ensure that I mentioned at this hearing that that happened, and they want to prevent any further damage happening to any of the surrounding properties if these are to be approved. With that in mind, staff recommends approval with conditions of DRH 22-00003. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Questions for staff at the moment? Seeing none, is the applicant present?
Hi, good evening. Yes, Ryan Lehrman, developer builder of the project, is present.
Thank you. Anything that you'd like to add to staff's presentation?
First, Michaela, thank you for the report. Regarding what Michaela touched on regarding a full two-story on lot 11, and that would page 9, if we could reference the left elevation of that parcel. The design intent, we really try to keep good symmetry across all 5 parcels. And secondly, we really tried to design the left elevation of parcel 11 to maximize the privacy of that northern neighbor, which I believe we did. We did 2 small transom windows that really are there just to allow some natural light in, which would give total privacy to the northern neighbor. I'm worried if we had to do a 1.5 or kind of a partial story with, say, a dormer, that dormer would be opposing that northern neighbor and be staring right into their window. So I feel like this is a better design. Even though it is a full 2-story, it really maximizes privacy and kind of keeps the symmetry of the overall project.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any members of the public wishing to testify on this item? Yes, please come forward, and if you would state your name and address for the record.
I brought a PowerPoint, so I'm not sure who's going to operate that. It's not going to be very good, but it's going to put the information out here. Okay, I'm Julie Hovey. I live at 3707 Nez Perce in Boise. So go to the next slide. I'm going to jump right into this. The previous project, which is north of these properties by Brian Peavy, was a substandard development. This would be slide 2. And the ACHD district policy 7210 said he had to open the alley and pave it. Go to slide 3. I think you're ahead of me about a couple of slides. Go back one. Go back another one. All right, there's the district policy. Says he has to pave the alley and open it. Next slide. And he should go through the process to get that alley open. Next slide. Those were their specific conditions of approval for the previous development. All right, next slide, please. Okay, this is for Ben, and same policy, 7210-2 says he needs to, if he has to take access from the alley, he needs to pave it and he needs to open it. And I want to assure that's going to happen. For some reason, because the previous developer next door just didn't want to do it, they went and got a license agreement and they didn't do it. They just let the alley be halfway open and let it remain dirt and gravel. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen here. Next slide. This is a picture of the garages. My next ask would be that these garages not be connected. Many of these developments have been built with separate garages per the individual units. And the massing, when I look out my front window, is going to be garage after garage after garage. And I don't think that's in keeping with the spirit of new development and making things look the best they can. He'll have to work with those dimensions. He's got 21.5 feet or so by 22. So he's got individual homes, but he wants to join the garages. And I think that's just a little bit off. And if the homes are supposed to be 1.5 stories, I think they should be 1.5 stories. That little home they showed you was one of many very small 1-story homes surrounding the area. So next slide. There again, it should be a paved driveway, apron, or an alley will also, or a paved alley will also be required. Next slide. And he may request a waiver. He may say, oh, well, I've done it better. Well, the ordinance shall not negatively impact the existing neighborhood and shall enhance the overall design quality of the project. And granting of such relief will not be materially detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, or injust property improvements or the quiet enjoyment of the surrounding properties. That's me going real fast. Next slide, please. Yeah, and you're supposed to pay attention to the massing, the construction of the buildings. So next slide, please.
Ma'am, you're out of time.
Can I just show you one picture?
Sure. Absolutely. Since last item on the agenda tonight.
This is from my kitchen window. I'll see 19 additional trips a day, about 10 new garages, so about 2 a day. And that's what comes to my kitchen window. And so I'm asking if Ben wants to buy me a little tree or a bush that I can put out in front of my kitchen window, and I'll name it Ben. But please don't create problems and leave things half done to be not enjoyed by the existing neighbors. Thank you for the time to talk.
Josh, was there someone online that'd like to? Okay, at this time, if you would, when you're able, please state your name and address for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, Mary Moran. I am at 3711 West Nez Perce Street. We moved there in 2020, and these homes, we have the same problem that Ms. Holby has, that the alleyway is going to be coming in, the headlights will be coming and being shown right into our home there, as well as all the dirt and debris that will be coming onto the roadway from the alleyway if it is not paved. Those are the two main concerns that I have. You know, all the dirt and everything from the alleyway, as well as the headlights and the traffic going in to the existing alleyway. And I did happen to notice on one of the schematics was there didn't seem to be the bus stop on the picture showing on the last southernmost lot. And I didn't know if that bus stop was going to be moved or if they just neglected to put it onto their picture.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any other online, any other people? Seeing none in person? Is the applicant still present? And if you would you like to make a rebuttal? Or any clarifications?
Hi, yes, Ryan Lehrman here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So, first off, I can't speak for the original developer or builder of those northernmost properties. That's 100% out of my control. What he or she did or did not abide by with ACHD approval regarding that alley. I have received the report and we will 100% go through that and abide by every recommendation in the ACHD report. But again, I can't speak to what the original, developer of that northern property can or can't do, or did, I guess. The other thing is with those, the reason I attach on those detached garages, the reason I attach them in twos is because it enables me to do a wider garage door at 18 feet versus most of those detached garages are only 16 feet and there's just no way you can get 2 cars in those. By attaching them, it gives me a little more space and I can, do an increased garage door and at 18 feet, and it just enables, easily parking 2 cars in those garages, which frees up street space. Let's see if I'm missing something. I think that's, and I guess just in closing, I'm going with the code, with what I can and can't do on these substandard lots. So, the draftsman and I, we really tried to abide by, the law, the code. So, that's what we went by in closing.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mrs. Ball.
One quick question. Mr. Lehman, from the plans that you provided, I assume that lots 11 through 14 are basically single family residences. My question on the remaining lot there on lots 15 and 16, I noticed that it's a 5-bedroom unit and each bedroom has its own separate full bath. Are you intending that unit be used more as a small apartment as opposed to a single family residence?
It will be a rental kind of affordable housing because of the bus stop right there and the mass transit. That will be more of a investment type rental property. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
I have a question as well. I see that the entrances or the fronts of the buildings don't line up. And I know that in most neighborhoods and generally in urban design, we want all of the fronts of the buildings to line up. Is there a reason that lots 14 and 12 have the buildings moved closer to the sidewalk than the others?
So per the code, that's what we were told to do, that we wanted the front setbacks needed to be staggered or, altered, to kind of add visual appeal. But, that's certainly something we could change, but that's how we read the code actually.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
None at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll close the public portion of the testimony and bring back to the committee for discussion and a motion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Secretary.
I have a lot of issues with this development, and I really think that there are more issues with the code than with the development. I know we have a minimum, we have guidelines as to varying colors and undulation and different roof lines. And I think this project took those minimums and ran with them a little too far. Everything looks very jumbled to me. And if we looked at that original white cottage on Nez, it was on Nez Perce, is that correct? Thank you. Like that is what you see in that neighborhood. And then what we see proposed before us is exactly the opposite of that. It's like every building has, I can't count that quickly, 4 or 5 roof lines of its own in a single building. And, several colors, several different materials. And I'm having trouble deciding whether that's on the developer or that's an error in our code, because I don't think any building should ever look like this. And they look sort of like dentist offices to me, or like they should be pushed together and be a strip mall. I mean, it pains me to see this in a neighborhood that is originally those, single or two-story sort of simple, cute houses. I don't know how we can allow this to get built. And the fact that there are two buildings that are by our code that are, don't start the same as the other three buildings, that makes zero sense to me as well. I mean, if you look at the older neighborhoods in the city, the East End, the North End, a lot of parts of the bench, including around here, everything lines up. The fronts of all the buildings line up perfectly, and that creates a much better neighborhood cohesion. So I have really no issue with the massing. It's the number of roof lines and colors and materials that really does not suit the neighborhood.
Okay. Other comments? Guess to kind of summarize, I mean, the alternate, I think, is when we try to put that code in, is we could have basically 5 identical buildings with exactly the same color with no character between any of them, which I think that's, a part of the basis of trying to mix up roof lines, mix up colors, provide some design irregularities as we go across there. Yeah, I think some of the style with the shed roofs and the number of planes is probably a little bit of personal preference. It may not be my favorite either, but I don't find it offensive by any means, but I'd open it up to anybody else's thoughts and comments.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Stead.
To directly reference some of the conditions of approval, particularly with relation to the massing of the buildings on the north and the south. I recognize that the code for the substandard lot would indicate that those need to be 18 feet at midline of the roof. Particularly for lot 15, 16, given that is across a public right of way, so easily 60 feet away from the nearest house. I don't necessarily believe that needs to be fully reduced to a partial 2-story. I would like to see the elimination of the shed roof there, particularly since it's not being used to any advantage for daylighting or anything like that, which would thereby bring the midline of that roof down significantly and closer into compliance. As far as lot 11 goes, it's a bit of a conundrum. I think, I would propose the same, eliminate the shed roof on that, and that gets you closer into compliance. But I believe they're 18 feet to the top plate of those 2nd-story walls, and that seems like it's awfully close, particularly when they're next to a building of similar mass and scale.
$18,300.
It's close enough for jazz, which is the whole point in infill, right? We're looking for diversity. We're not looking for absolute uniformity. So I think if we knock a couple shed roofs off and set them as a standard gable, keeping in line where they currently sit with the eaves, we ought to be making this much more palatable to the nearby neighborhood. I recognize that new development within several decades old neighborhood will always stick out, but I think there's a certain amount of growing pains that we're going to feel in this city that cannot always be avoided.
You mind bringing up that front elevation one more time, please? I think I'd agree with you on lot 15 and 16. Kind of the interesting thing is you kind of sit back from lots 11 and 12 and 13 and 14 with these substandard lots, as you kind of look at it, those basically the two shed roofs make a gable roof themselves. And so kind of have a nod to a gable roof element that I don't think those bother me. I do like your thought of eliminating the shed roof on basically the lot 15, 16 side. And is there an elevation of that street side of lot 15, 16 too? That help bring down the mass. So it's there on the bottom, right? Yeah, I think that would actually help that one as well. I think that was a good comment. As for the garages, it's if we looked at a site plan, I mean, pushing two of them together actually gives you a bigger break between the garages, which seems a little more substantial than having just a 2-foot or a small break in between the garages. That's kind of a useless space. So I actually don't mind the attached garages clustered the way they are. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Zuckerman.
I agree very much with the garages that, yes, pushing two together does allow for larger breaks and more light will come through and it will just look better. I know that in other projects, we've required applicants to add materials and add variation in colors, and I'd like to see us reduce the number of colors and materials on this one. I know we can't, redesign the whole thing. And I mean, it looks like there's sort of 3 houses layered into one in each of these. But I would love to see just the number of colors and materials reduced so that it doesn't look so jumbled. And I think that there is a way. I mean, I agree that there will be growing pains in any neighborhood that's experiencing infill, but we saw a slide here today that was, I believe, the adjacent property that looked like a duplex. Thank you. That to me was done a lot more tastefully. The roof, the front roof line reads much more consistent with the rest of the neighborhood, and the fact that there aren't 4 colors on one facade, it just makes it a lot cleaner. And this is sort of a modern version of what already exists, as opposed to, I don't know, like an Anywhere USA contemporary structure that's thrown into this neighborhood.
Good.
So my proposal or my ask would be that we ask the applicant to reduce the number of colors and reduce the number of materials on each building.
Any other thoughts on that from the rest of the committee? The challenge on these a lot of times too is we're looking at a straight flat elevation and not a view down the street to really get an idea of the difference and how those colors and materials react. Yeah, I could go in either way. I don't mind the color scheme on it. So but if anybody wants to take a stab at a motion, I would be open. Sounds like from a massing standpoint, there at least was somewhat of a consensus that changing the lot 15, 16 shed roof to kind of knock down the massing towards the street would help, and that the height on lot 11 was Close enough for jazz? Is that what you actually stated?
If you like a direct quote, yes.
Yeah. And then questions, I guess, just on the materiality and the setback pieces.
Yeah, I'd love to hear if any other, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, if any other committee members have issue with that or prefer to leave it as is.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just to weigh in, I agree with you in part. I think this is an excellent example of the kind of peril that our design by numbers code can pose, while at the same time, I see the need for some of those numbers to be included in our sort of arbitrary approach to altering materiality and whatnot. In this particular instance, I agree. I think it's a little busy. I don't know that. I think we have the statutory standing to say, hey, don't do as many as you've got. But at the same time, I think, limiting the color palette to 2 colors per house plus a natural material would go a long way for making this kind of blend into the neighborhood a little more.
I guess is it the color palette itself, or is it just the contrast between the lighter colors and the darker colors that maybe provide some of that?
I don't know that it's necessarily the contrast. I think it's the fact that there are 3 colors plus cultured stone, plus probably a door color, plus probably a trim color.
Plus different sidings on the different, each color looks to be a different type of siding.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. At the same time, once these are out in the public, they can paint their house any color they want, I guess, too, at a certain point in the future. That sort of the natural material, and there's always a few eclectic colored houses in every neighborhood that you kind of wonder what they were thinking. But I don't know that there's a whole lot in here that I'm opposed to. I think with this discussion, I hope that the developer is maybe taking some of that into consideration and might revisit that. But I'm open for whatever way anybody wants to take on a motion, if they want to try to write that into a motion, or if just want to leave that as a consideration.
I'll take a stab.
Okay.
And amendments can come in discussion if needed. I move to approve DRH 22-00003, subject to the findings of facts and conditions of approval, accepting the site-specific condition 1A and adding site-specific condition 1H, that lot 1516 remove its shed roof and only include a gable roof along the south facade.
Okay, so moved. Thank you. Looking for a second before discussion.
Dead on the floor.
A Lots of contemplation. Or we could enter, if it has no support, could entertain a new motion. Still waiting for a second if anybody's interested.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Seeing that there's not much mileage to this one, I would like to revisit a point that was brought up prior to all of this discussion, which was the paving of the alleyway.
Okay, good point.
I don't see that in any of our standard conditions of approval, nor do I have the code handy. It's a big document. I don't have a copy of it that I just look around. What is the requirement there exactly? And will the developer be required to fulfill it?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I just pulled up on the screen. This is ACHD's report. They would be the ones that would require that. They did not include in their site-specific conditions of approval a condition to pave the alley. There are times when they do require that, but this was not one of those instances.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is it within our purview to require that? Or is that left to ACHD?
I think that looks like that's one of those items that we could include as a condition.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It appears that yes, that is something that we could require.
Okay, thank you. Can you bring up the aerial just so I can take a look at that alleyway again, just in general context? Guess it's hard to tell from the aerial if that's a common condition to have gravel alleys in that neighborhood.
Hard to tell.
Looks like there isn't even a complete alley system everywhere.
Is it dead end north of the house?
That one appears to, yeah. Okay. Well, anybody else want to take another stab at a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I
Oh, yep, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, we'll declare the previous motion dead since there was no second. Thank you.
sorry, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I can't in good conscience support this project unless it's completely redesigned. So I feel like it is not within the context of the neighborhood whatsoever. And that's why I didn't want to second the motion or even come up with a new proposal, because to me, it's not just about the massing and the pavement of the alleyway. It's that this project doesn't belong in this neighborhood at all.
There's also, I mean, we can see there's some other substandard lots and some, this is a fairly common infill condition. Do you want to, I guess if it's not about the massing or the color that was expressed, is there some other opposition you have to?
Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, it's the fact that the facade and the design of the building doesn't reflect the existing architecture of the neighborhood.
Okay. Oops, thank you. So I guess there's probably some discussion on questions, thoughts from the committee on paving the alley piece. Is that a pretty, staff, is that a pretty common condition on some of these, some hit and miss maybe?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, hit and miss is what it sounds like. Usually that comes from ACHD, and that's something that we'll include in our conditions of approval. We'll say comply with any conditions of approval required by ACHD, including paving the alley if that's something that they require. So normally we let ACHD make that decision.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Zavala.
A discussion with council, an option that the committee has here. And correct me if I'm state this incorrectly. We could defer this for up to 60 days or redesign without giving it approval or denial. Give the applicant an opportunity to take what he's heard here this evening and make some refinements to present to us at a later date.
Okay, so that the committee feels, is that more acceptable than going to another work session for redesign for?
Functionally, it's the same thing, whether you call it a work
Okay.
session or a public hearing, as long as it's properly noticed and open to the public.
Yeah, we'd probably want a public hearing, wouldn't
But you probably want us to keep it as a public hearing.
Yeah.
Kim?
Mr. Chairman, I would support that.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
While I, on a personal level, don't love this development, I worry about the precedent that we set by deferring developments of this sort in what would otherwise not be a design review area, aside from the substandard lots. And since I don't think the substandard lots are necessarily the problem, I would prefer to approve this in a modified sense, so that we're not a roadblock to the potential alleviation of the housing crisis, and just another reason why people can cite that it takes too long to get anything done around here.
Good points. With that, is anybody want to take a stab at another motion with either additional conditions where the applicant to address, or to have the applicant come back in a work session to provide alternate elevations for consideration?
It's fine. I could live with that in a work session.
Okay.
Let's see. Our first motion died, so we're looking at the original set of conditions then.
Original set of conditions, I think there was the 1H that Mr. Erstad was considering for the change of the shed roof. And I don't think we addressed the alley at all on the first motion. But yes, we're looking for a new motion.
Okay. Well, I suspect if the aerial photo is halfway correct, and if I'm reading it correctly, and the alley does not go clear through, it stops at the residence to the west, I guess, or north. I suspect that's why he got a waiver about having that alley paved, or his portion of that alley paved at that particular point in time. So requiring the alley on this particular project leaves a little stub of dirt driveway at the end of it, I guess. And okay.
I guess the only considerations for public testimony concerning, since it is a dirt, it continues in the same condition that it currently is. There is no change. However, there's likely to have more traffic on that. And so is there a impact to the neighbors from
Yeah,
Dustin?
from that one single.
Yep.
Mhm. Okay. Well, let's try this. Um, Chairman, I would move doing this, I would move for approval of DRH 22-0003, subject to the findings of fact and conditions of approval and conditions of law as recommended in the staff report with the following changes. That item A in the slide 1A be deleted and replaced with that lot, unit on lot 1516 will have the second story shed roof portion removed for its entire length in the design. That we'll add item H, that the alley on the lots, the entire lot length in the alley up to the Pierce Park Street be improved with asphalt to ACHD conditions and requirements, and that the applicant return to this committee for a work session to review the potential design changes that were discussed in the meeting. Does that make sense?
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Is it clear, everybody, what's being? No more discussion? Well, with this, that's Christina, will you please call the roll?
Sabala,
Aye.
Marsh,
Aye.
Zuckerman,
Aye.
Erstad.
Aye.
Motion carries.
That concludes our items for tonight. And with that, we are adjourned.